Are you somebody that is still exhausted even when you wake up? Are you finding yourself, you're going through your day, everything's quite normal, but there's something stuck in your throat. You feel like you're on the verge of tears and you don't know why. Maybe you feel a little bit out of control. You feel like everything's on top of you. You feel like you can't win no matter what you do. There's just always this low feeling. You're so exhausted. Because if that's true, then you are in the right place. This is all about burnout and how to recognize certain symptoms, some that you may not have heard of before, and most importantly, how to start tackling it, how to take that first step. Hi, I'm Caroline. I am your personal performance coach. I debug the mindsets, habits, and communication of aspiring high performers so they can work smarter, not harder. If that sounds like the kind of content that interests you, you might want to think about subscribing, join this little community. I'd love to have you here. Okay, so this video, which you'll already know from the title, Burnout Basics, we're going to cover the real foundations of this topic. This is something that everybody wants to know about. Everybody talks to me about. All of my clients are interested in. I've done so many webinars and workshops and delivered toolkits and all these different things around this topic. It is one of the most highly requested that I get, and it's because so many people are suffering from it. I wanted to record this as the very first video on this channel because I wanted to kind of share this with as many people as possible, and it's symbolic of what has really brought me to this point, because I've experienced burnout. Everybody I know has experienced burnout, whether that is colleagues, whether it is clients, whether it is friends and family. Everybody has experienced this. So it seemed like the right one to start with. Now, the first few things to keep in mind are the regular symptoms, the symptoms that you probably think of, because when I do a workshop and I say, well, what is burnout? And I get people to throw stuff out at me, usually they say things like extreme fatigue, exhaustion, imposter syndrome, things like overwhelm, feeling trapped, feeling helpless, out of control, like there's nowhere to go. All these things flood out of people. There's also another one which is around the negativity towards yourself, because in the beginning it's all about how you feel, but then it's how you feel about yourself. It's the negative slant that your language then takes, and the way that you feel about doing anything outside of just the norm, the day-to-day. Everything becomes like a snowball effect, and it just overwhelms and it drowns you. So the next thing that we've got to think about is, all right, that's how it feels, but what really is it? What is burnout? And if you want to look at there's so many textbook definitions of this thing, but in its simplest form, burnout is the physical or mental exhaustion after a prolonged period of stress. Because our bodies are built for short-term stress. If you think about our primitive brain, our ancestors, how they had to survive, it was all short bursts of stress, things like running away from a threat. But now we're in situations all the time where the length of time we are spending in a stress state is getting longer and longer. It's more intense. If anything, it's every waking hour. We're surrounding ourselves by threat responses, even if we don't mean to. That could be something in work and it's a social threat. It could be something on social media that could be about our expectations, the way we see ourselves. But there are so many ways that we are opening ourselves up to stress that we're now finding prolonged periods of stress to be the norm, which is why burnout is becoming the norm, which is why all of these horrible feelings are becoming the norm. So, okay, we know what burnout is. Did you know, though, that there are actually 5 stages to burnout? Did you know that this is something that progresses over a period of time? I bet you didn't, because lots of people that I talk to don't know that. And even if you did, it's really hard to recall that kind of thing off the top of your head. And it's not something that we have a conscious awareness of. So let's go there next. The first phase is what I call the honeymoon phase. If you imagine starting a job in the beginning, or a new project, or a new anything, it's that excitement, there's no stress there other than, oh, this is really exciting, or I don't know what to expect. There's no fear. There's no negative connotation of stress. The second stage is acute stress. So this is where we start to feel those low level signs of stress creeping up. And you find yourself saying things like, oh, what a week, you have an awareness there that something is changing, something is shifting, that you are tireder than you were before, that kind of thing. Stage 3 is then chronic stress. And that's where we start to shift into high levels of stress being the norm. So instead of, oh, what a week, it now becomes, oh, what a day. And then it just becomes, oh, another day. So there's that awareness, again, that we've now gone from low level stress to higher levels of stress for it being normalized. Then stage 4 is where we hit burnout. And this is where you get that continuous cycle of symptoms. So whatever those low level and then high level versions were for you, because it's different for everybody. And this is the thing. No one person's 5 stages are the same. We all experience stress differently. So whatever your symptoms are, whether it is fatigue, whether it is those mindset issues, whether it is aches and pains, and we'll get into some of those later, whatever it is for you, this is where they start to really increase and they become permanent. You end up in this cycle of those physical and mental symptoms, a cycle that it feels like you can't break out of. But then there's one final step, which is where it becomes habitual burnout. Now, habitual burnout is where it becomes your default state. We're now so deep into burnout that we can't really claw ourselves back out of it at this point. It becomes oppressive. It becomes the norm. It's who we are now. We're just constantly exhausted. The interesting thing about how our system works when this happens is that we recalibrate to that new level of stress. So we think that that's just how we are. So then whenever we try and introduce any form of rest or any form of taking a break, we feel like we're not pushing enough, because that state of stress is now so ingrained in us that if we start to rest in any way, then we're not doing good enough. We're not doing enough. We should be stressed in order to be normal. And that isn't healthy either. Okay, so from this stage, how do we know which phase we're in? How do we know which stage of burnout we're in? What are the symptoms? What are we looking for? And if you've come to this video, it might be that you're looking for yourself, or it might be that you're looking for a colleague or somebody that you manage or a loved one, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. I want to go back for a second to that idea of it being subjective, because that is so important. I'm going to give you things to look out for, things that might be a symptom, but obviously we want to keep an eye on them/us, if it's us that we're looking at, because there are loads of reasons for why we might be feeling this way. Sometimes it's acute, it's temporary, it's only happening in a short period. But where we're looking at burnout is where it's prolonged. It's where you're noticing these things over a really long period of time, or other people are picking up on it. So for example, somebody might say, God, you're always so negative these days. And you hadn't even noticed that in yourself. So it's important to just remember this is completely subjective. There are lots of different reasons as well for each of these symptoms. But if you're experiencing a lot of them all in one go, this could be a really, really strong sign that you are experiencing burnout. So let's start with the mental stress symptoms. Now, I already kind of talked about a few of these in the beginning, things like fatigue, but it's not just acute fatigue. Like, let's take a physical example, right? If you go to the gym, you work out, and you do a really intense workout, your body's going to hurt. That is a form of stress. But it's acute stress, because then your body works to recover you. After a couple of days, the aches and pains are gone. It's a short-term response. But the idea is that obviously we recover from that and then we move on. Now, if we're talking about stress over a long period of time, that's not acute. We're going into chronic. So if you're experiencing chronic fatigue instead of acute fatigue, i.e. I had a really bad night's sleep and now I feel really tired, that's different to you're exhausted all day, every day, no matter how much you sleep. That is chronic fatigue. That's a slightly different symptom to what we're dealing with if it's just acute, if it's just short term. Then we have things like anxiety and that feeling, like I said in the beginning, of being on the verge of tears. Or it might be that you had sleep problems and now those have progressed to even worse, verging on insomnia. It might be that you had headaches in the beginning, now they've progressed to regular migraines. It might be that you develop hormonal issues, because when we talk about stress, we're talking about cortisol in the body as well. That is the hormone that is related to stress. So if you have a hormonal imbalance, you're also going to get symptoms related to that as well. All these things are physical. All these things are symptoms that we can keep an eye on and see developing. But remember, there is a difference between the short-term version of these and the long-term. So now we get into things around behavior. What symptoms around our behavior and language can be an indicator around burnout? A key one would be lack of focus, getting confused easily, procrastinating. Procrastinating is a really interesting one because most people, I'm going to do a whole video around time management, but for the purposes of this, most people see procrastination as just something to bully themselves over. Oh, why am I not just doing the thing that I should be doing? But procrastination is actually a freeze response in action. So remember that fight, flight, freeze response that we all feel when we get a threat response come in. Freeze is often translated as procrastinating. We feel so overwhelmed by the idea of doing that task that our body expresses a need to freeze. And it does that by often doing something like scrolling on social media or doing whatever it happens to be that takes us out of that overwhelm because our brain is trying to escape. It's trying to protect us, and that's okay. But there's no need to bully yourself over procrastination. It's just another example of where you could be experiencing overwhelm, and that overwhelm could be from prolonged stress. There's also the idea of loss of motivation for anything outside of the day-to-day. So if you are somebody that maybe you used to be a true socialite, you used to do stuff all the time outside, and now just over the last few months, you don't know what it is, but you just don't have the energy anymore. You know, you can't just generate that out of nowhere, and you feel yourself saying no to a lot more opportunities now. And I just don't have the headspace to cope with that, or I've got to get that work done. That's got to be the priority, but then you go to do it and you don't do it anyway. You know, it's that kind of thing. You don't have any energy left in the tank to do anything outside of just getting through the day. Then we've got mindset issues like imposter syndrome or decision fatigue. I mean, imposter syndrome is an interesting one anyway, because most high performers or people that are aspiring to be a high performer and improve their performance over time struggle with imposter syndrome, because the very idea of being a high performer is you're always challenging yourself. You're always doing something new. And the very act of doing something new puts you into imposter syndrome because you're doing stuff all the time you've never done before. So if you are noticing that little things like that, which it's okay if you feel them every once in a while when you're taking on a new challenge or you're doing something different or there's change happening, that's fine. But if you're noticing that as a prolonged thing, as part of some of the other symptoms that we're talking about, that could indicate, again, something else to do with burnout. Then if there are any managers watching or team leads or anything like that, this is one that you want to pay attention to, because people that are suffering burnout will skip holidays. They won't take breaks. They'll miss out all those things because it is easier for them to just keep going no matter what. And it's because there are so many decisions required when we decide to take a break. If it's not something that is just in our diary or is normalized, or we've not taken a holiday in a long time, it's actually easier for the brain to just keep going, doing what it's doing, because right now we're alive. If we keep going, just doing this thing, then we'll be fine. It doesn't realize that we need to slow down, we need to recharge, we need to do any of that stuff. So a really key indicator of people that are either approaching burnout or are already in a burnt out state is that they are skipping breaks and they're saying, oh, I'll do it after that project or when that one begins or whatever. It's just an excuse. That is a really key thing to look out for. And then another thing is just the sheer amount of people that are underperforming due to burnout. So the number of people that they could be doing so much more. They have so much more potential. You might be seeing that in yourself. You know that you want amazing things, but you just don't have the energy for it. Or you might be managing them and you get so frustrated because you can see the potential and they can't. And it might be because they have just got to a point of burnout. They are so exhausted that they can't think of doing anything outside of it. They're just keeping the lights on at this point. So that's another really key indicator that there's something much bigger going on. Okay, so we've talked about what is burnout, where does it come from, what are some of the symptoms, but why is everybody struggling with this right now? Why is it that now everybody is searching for this topic? Everybody is asking coaches like me or searching for other resources around this topic. Why now? In my mind, there are three main reasons why that is. Number one, we are not built for this world. Number two, we are far more open to threats all day than we ever have been before. And number three, we were never taught how to manage this. We were never taught stress management in school. Now, that's a personal gripe of mine because I think that stress management, along with a whole host of other things, should be taught in schools. But I'll get off my soapbox and I'll just explain where this comes from. Because the thing is, stress, like we talked about, is something that is supposed to be short term. We're not built for this workplace, for this world that we live in, for all of the screens. We know this. But we're also leaving ourselves open to threats more often because we're also not taught how to manage stress. We're not taught how to build mental resilience and build that barrier, or taught how to get out of those difficult situations where we're experiencing really horrible things in the workplace, like from workplace bullying to coming off a really difficult call and it didn't go how you wanted, and how do you bounce back from that? Now, these are things that over time I'll hopefully create lots of videos about in more detail, but this is really critical. Stress needs to be managed. It needs to be something that we can cope with, yeah, but that we actively work towards improving our skill set around. Let's just take this back a step. Burnout is prolonged stress. So if we learn how to deal with stress and make it more acute, make it more short term, learn how to bounce back from it more effectively, then we eliminate burnout, because it never reaches the point of prolonged stress to reach that. Yeah. So stress is the most important thing in all of this for us to understand and for us to work with and for us to take control of, because believe it or not, you absolutely can. Okay, so we're now through to the end stage here. We know all about burnout. We know how to recognize it in ourselves. We know where it comes from. All right, how the hell do we start tackling this? How do we take that first step? Because when it comes to undoing the effects of burnout, depends how long it's been prolonged for. Let's face it, if you've been in a burnt out state for a long period of time, there's a whole host of symptoms that you're potentially dealing with at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what that first step is, and then I'm going to give you an exercise to take away. Now, I'm going to caveat this by saying, full disclosure, I am not a doctor. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not any of these things, but I am a coach. And I deal with mindset and how to improve your thinking every single day. So what I'm going to give you are true mindset exercises. They're things that can help you get started. But I don't know the specifics without talking to you, each of you, about what your specific symptoms are, what is causing it, and all those things. So I'm going to give you the first step, but of course I'm going to say, if you are experiencing anything of what I have talked about so far today, please do seek one of the many resources out there and places where you can get help, because it might be your doctor, or it might be searching for specific symptoms that I've talked about. Whatever it is, there are so many ways to get help. But for now, I'm going to give you that first step. So the first thing is, we have got to find the root cause. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's walk backwards with me, okay? So again, burnout is caused by prolonged stress. Okay. Prolonged stress is the result of unmanaged threat responses. Yeah, we all agreed on that. Then we take another step back. So that unmanaged threat response, that's based in fear. Something is happening in our pattern in behavior that causes us to react in a not so useful way. Now, that will have built up over a long period of time. Some of our worst behaviors, if you want to call it that, can be tracked back decades. You know, they're instilled in us from a very young age. And when I work with a client, that's part of my job, is to unpick, where did this come from? Where did this pattern in thinking or behavior come from? And that can be said especially for the way that we manage stress. It can be that we've learned it from a parent or from somebody else in the workplace. It doesn't matter where it's come from, but it's come from somewhere. And the point is, if it's causing a chain reaction of stress and burnout, and not a very good one at that, it's not useful to us anymore. It doesn't serve us. And the great thing is, we can replace it. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes commitment, but you can do it. And I'm speaking from personal experience here because I've done it. I've helped clients to do it. There are so many people that have done it. If you want to be a high performer, managing stress and understanding how to manage it for yourself, and that, again, it's that subjective nature of it, right? We have to get to know ourselves. If you can do that, you will be able to achieve what you want to. But it starts by finding that root cause. Where is that stress, that fear factor coming from? That's what we need to find out, because fear comes from the unknown. Now, what that unknown is, I can't tell you without speaking to you, but I know it's there. And the great thing about finding that unknown is that once you find it, it's not unknown anymore. It's not something to be afraid of. It's something that you can start working with. You can see it for what it is and you can start tackling it. If you're following my logic, if we find the root cause, we find the reason all the way down the line for burnout. And if we can tackle that root cause and we can get rid of it and we can replace it with something that is constructive, productive, useful, then the chain reaction follows as well. If you focus on the action, the result will come. It absolutely will. But like I said, it takes work. So what is that first step? How do we do this? How do we find the root cause if you've never done this before? You're really not going to like me. But you have to have a really horrible, painful conversation with yourself. And you have to lean into whatever it is that hurts. I know it's awful. I know you don't want to do it. I know that this is the last thing in the world that you want to do is confront this thing. And everything in your body and your mind is telling you to run away from it. But that's what's causing the burnout, because you are running away from it. And you never stop running away from it. And it's exhausting. We need to get some perspective back. We need to just take a breath. And if you lean into that pain, and that's something that I'll probably say a lot on this channel over the years, however long this channel is going to exist for, hopefully a very long time. Whether it is a business client or a mindset client, whether it is to achieve a revenue goal or simply a performance metric, it doesn't matter. I always say the same thing. If you have a fear, if you have a behavior you want to change, if you have something that is a root cause that you hate, you lean into the pain. You confront it. Because once you confront it and you become interested in it, it's actually impossible for our brain to be interested and curious and afraid at the same time. Once you bring that intrigue towards it, you then start to educate yourself on it. You start to bring knowledge to it. That removes the fear because it isn't an unknown anymore. It's a known factor. And a known factor is something we can work with, something we can deal with. Most of what we do, especially when it comes to burnout, because most of the time our burnout exists in a certain scenario, it starts in somewhere like the workplace. The workplace is the major one. Now, I'm going to do a whole video. That's actually the next video that I have planned is around workplace burnout specifically, because it deserves its own topic around that, because there's loads of factors that come into that. But the workplace is a really good example of where this thing tends to develop. And we don't like to really think of it like this, but work is a social environment. Work is actually our most important social environment because it's responsible for keeping a roof over our head. It is responsible for whether the bills get paid, whether the food is on the table. It's our most important, vital social group. So even when people say, oh, I leave my personal life at the door, we don't. It's all intermingled. And actually, our workplace forms a really important part of our personal lives. It's where we spend most of our day, right? So it makes sense that it's where most of these burnout symptoms tend to manifest. I'm going to give you a quick exercise to find this root cause now. And I'm going to set you some parameters for how to do this and kind of where to look, when you're trying to diagnose this thing. And it's called SCARF. And it's on the screen right now as I'm saying this. So we have status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So status is our relative importance to others. So our status, think of it within a hierarchy maybe in the workplace. Our certainty is our ability to predict events or things around us. Autonomy is our level of control. Think about somebody that has maybe too much autonomy, then they're not given enough direction in what they're doing. Whereas somebody that has too little autonomy, that's where we get into micromanagement. Relatedness is then our relatedness towards a group, our perception of how we relate to a group, where we sit within it, our importance within it, that kind of thing. And then fairness is our ability to perceive a fair exchange. So for example, something like, I'm now doing way more work than I am being paid for. I feel really unfairly treated. It's a really simple example, but it demonstrates the point. Most of our issues within the workplace, or to be perfectly honest, within any social group, come down to these 5 things. There is always a way of linking it to one of these 5, because these are the drivers of our social behavior. Now, really good managers are able to use these to push teams towards seeking a reward rather than running away from a threat. Leaders are really used to using an understanding and a tool like this to be able to get the best out of their teams, get the best performance. But we can use it every single day to diagnose something like, what is really annoying me here? What is really upsetting me? Why am I feeling the amount of stress that I do? And I guarantee you there are so many scenarios that you wouldn't even dream of thinking would come down to one of those 5 things, but it absolutely does. So here's a very quick example. Let's go back to that idea of workload, because that is one that gets so much. I thought that would be a really useful common stressor to go with. So let's say that you are in the workplace and you have a lot of workload overwhelm. You feel like you've just got too much. You feel like, I can't cope. And that is what is being the source of the burnout. That's not the source of the burnout. The burnout happens later, after ages of that stress response, because work has come in that perhaps you said yes to when you should have said no. That is the issue, not the fact that we've got time management issues, and all the calendars and apps in the world aren't going to help you. Again, I'll probably do a whole separate video on time management. If that sounds interesting, let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to put that on the roster of things coming up. But time management is not the issue. What happened is that way earlier in the line, a piece of work came in and you didn't know how to deal with that, so you just said yes. And then later down the line, you have so many things to cope with and you end up out of control. It spirals and you end up in that stage of feeling overwhelmed, overloaded, burnt out. Okay? So what really happened there? Well, let's go right back to that idea of saying yes when you should have said no. That could be a communication issue. Sure, you're not sure how to come back to that. That's fine. But what happened with the stressor? What was the fear? Remember, that's what we're looking for, is the fear. Depending on the situation, it might be that status is an issue, because you were worried that if you said no to that work, that might affect your position in the hierarchy. Maybe it was somebody senior to you that was asking you to do it, and you're very conscious of that, and there was a fear around that. Or it could be around autonomy. It could be that you have way too much autonomy, you don't have anywhere near the direction that you need, and actually that creates a huge amount of fear, so then you just take on everything and yeah, I'll deal with it, no problem, and then it spirals, and that leads to burnout. Or it could be fairness. It could be that there is a fear factor there around, God, I'm having so many things thrown at me, and I just don't feel like this is fair. And the stress and the fear there, which could be related, because often they do intermingle, is then affecting your response, your behavior around dealing with that stimulus. So depending on your situation, there are so many ways that burnout could be manifest from a workload issue. But it's never that. It's never that core problem. It's always something that happened earlier. So that's my question to you. What is happening earlier on? What is happening in those early stages? What's the behavior? Are you a people pleaser? Where does that come from? Which one of these 5 do you think is at the heart of your burnout, of your stress management issues? Okay, so now we've gone through everything. We've gone through the symptoms, the common stressors, where it comes from, all of that stuff. I want you to let me know in the comments, after you've had a real think about that, what you think your stressor is. But you'll also find in the description a download for you, because I know this thing can be difficult to get your head around. So I wanted to give you something to actually take away, so you don't have to keep watching this video, although you can, obviously, if you want to. But there's a download there for you. It's completely free. It summarizes everything that I've been through around that exercise, and it also gives you some extra tips about how to start taking those first few steps towards tackling burnout. Okay, so we've come to the end of this thing. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. I really feel for you if you are somebody that is struggling with any of these symptoms, but please know that whether it is one of the resources below or whether it is the exercise, there are so many ways that you can take that first step forward towards tackling this thing. Now, if you did enjoy it, please do think about subscribing. I'm going to be talking about this and many more things to come. Like I said, the next video is going to be all around workplace burnout, so I don't want you to miss that one if you think that's something that you would find useful. But other than that, have an amazing week. I will see you next Monday and have a good one. Take care of yourselves.